Dee Warner lived a quiet, structured life in Lenawee County, Michigan, where small farms dotted the landscape and people waved from their porches. The community was tight-knit, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's name, and where change was slow and subtle. Dee had built a comfortable life for herself. She ran a successful trucking business and helped manage her family's farm. She was known for her work ethic, determination, and fierce loyalty to those she loved. To most people, Dee seemed like someone who had everything under control. But those closest to her began to notice cracks in the surface. At 52, Dee had experienced her share of struggles, but none seemed more persistent than her relationship with her longtime partner, Dale Henderson. While they had been together for years and worked side by side, the relationship had grown strained. Friends said Dale had become increasingly possessive, and that Dee rarely went anywhere without informing him first. Over time, her independence seemed to fade. She stopped going out with friends as often, and when she did, her phone would buzz constantly with messages from Dale. Still, Dee rarely spoke negatively about him. She kept most of her feelings hidden, even from family. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, something shifted. Dee appeared more anxious than usual, often distracted and deep in thought. She told her brother she was considering major changes in her life and hinted that her relationship with Dale might be ending. At work, she seemed focused but tense, frequently checking her phone and stepping outside for long calls. She confided in a close friend that she felt trapped and was working on a plan to regain control of her finances and businesses. She had started seeing a lawyer in secret and was preparing documents that would separate her assets from Dale's. Those around her knew she was preparing for something, but no one expected what would come next. On April 24, 2021, Dee went about her day as usual. She worked late into the evening, sent a few texts to friends and family, and was last seen at her farmhouse near Tipton. Her final message was to her brother, a brief text that simply said she'd call him in the morning. That call never came. By midday, April 25th, her phone had stopped ringing. She didn't show up to work. She didn't respond to messages. Her car sat untouched in the driveway. Her dogs, normally her constant companions, were left unfed. Her purse, keys, and phone were still inside the house. There was no sign of forced entry, no note, no obvious struggle, just a sudden and complete silence. Her family knew something was wrong. Dee was not the type to disappear. She was responsible, careful, and not someone who would abandon her life without telling anyone. Panic set in quickly. Her daughter and siblings called friends, checked local hospitals, and drove to the farmhouse hoping to find her there. But Dee was gone, and as the hours passed, it became clear that whatever had happened to her was not by choice. Someone wanted her gone, and they thought they had made sure no one would ever find her. The search for Dee Warner began with her farmhouse, a modest home surrounded by acres of farmland in a quiet area just outside of Tipton. It was the heart of her life, where she worked, lived, and made plans for her future. When deputies first arrived, they were met by Dale Henderson, who appeared calm and unconcerned. He told them that Dee had left after an argument late Saturday night and hadn't returned. He claimed she just needed space, that she'd done it before. But those who knew Dee found that explanation hard to believe. She wouldn't leave without telling her daughter, or checking on her animals, or at least taking her phone. Inside the house, nothing was out of place. There were no broken lamps, no overturned furniture, no blood. But something about the stillness felt unnatural. Dee's purse was sitting on the kitchen counter. Her phone lay untouched on the table, the battery drained. Her favorite hoodie was draped over the back of a chair. Her car keys were still on the hook by the door, and her vehicle sat in the same spot it always did, undisturbed. There were no packed bags, no notes, no sign she had planned to leave. Her dogs, who she treated like children, had not been fed or let out. It was as if she had just vanished mid-step. Officers began to search the property. The barn, sheds, and surrounding fields were examined, but the scale of the land made it difficult. Dale limited access to certain areas, citing privacy and legal concerns. He said the barn's security cameras had stopped working days before, due to a power issue. Investigators noted the convenient timing. The footage, if it had existed, might have shown exactly what happened the night Dee went missing. The neighbors had nothing to report. It had been a typical quiet weekend in the countryside. No one saw or heard anything suspicious. But when a search party expanded to the woods behind the property, they found odd signs. Sections of ground that looked recently disturbed, burn piles that seemed fresh, and tire tracks that led away from the barn toward a remote section of the woods. Yet there was still no sign of Dee. In the days that followed, suspicion grew. Dale refused to take a polygraph test. He hired a lawyer and stopped answering questions from investigators. His behavior became increasingly cold, and he discouraged people from talking to the police. Meanwhile, Dee's family grew desperate. They printed flyers, held vigils, and coordinated search teams. Her daughter went on social media, pleading for answers. Friends, co-workers, and neighbors joined the search, hoping she had simply walked away and would be found safe. But deep down, many feared the worst. The more time passed, the clearer it became. Dee hadn't left on her own. There was no trail, no farewell message, no sign of life. It was as if someone had carefully removed her from the world and left no trace behind. But those closest to her weren't ready to give up. They knew Dee, and they knew something terrible had happened. And they believed the person responsible was standing right there, pretending to know nothing. As the investigation deepened, the focus turned to Dale Henderson. What had once been quiet suspicion began to harden into certainty. His behavior since Dee's disappearance wasn't just odd, it was calculated. He kept contact with law enforcement to a minimum, avoided the media, and seemed more concerned with maintaining control of Dee's assets than helping find her. Detectives began digging into his past, hoping to uncover patterns or motives that could point to foul play. What they found was unsettling. Dale had a long history of controlling behavior. Former partners and acquaintances described him as manipulative and prone to anger when things didn't go his way. Financial control was a recurring theme. He had a pattern of managing the money in his relationships, isolating his partners by tying them to joint accounts, shared properties, and mutual business interests. Dee had been no exception. While the trucking company bore her name and she had founded it, Dale had taken over most of the financial operations. He had access to her accounts, her passwords, and even her mail. Friends recalled that over the last year, Dee had begun quietly trying to untangle herself. She had started meeting with a lawyer in secret. She wanted to revise her will, reclaim ownership of her business, and separate her finances from Dale's. Her attorney later confirmed that Dee was preparing to confront him. She knew it wouldn't go over well, but she felt it was time. She no longer wanted to be under his control. That decision, investigators believed, may have cost her life. Employees at the trucking company began to talk. Some recalled how Dale had shown up to the office late the night Dee vanished. He looked disheveled, anxious, and smelled strongly of bleach. One worker remembered him retrieving a large tarp from the back of a truck days earlier. Another claimed Dale had burned something large behind the barn around midnight that weekend. No one had thought much of it at the time, but in hindsight, the actions took on a darker meaning. Phone records provided another clue. Dale's cell phone had pinged in an unexpected area on the night Dee went missing, near a wooded patch of land just over 2 miles from the farmhouse. The data showed he had driven there around 3 a.m. and remained for approximately 25 minutes. When police searched that location, they found what looked like a recently disturbed patch of soil. It had since been covered with brush, but the marks were still visible. Cadaver dogs were brought in, and though nothing was immediately recovered, the dogs showed interest in a specific area. Police marked the location and moved forward with deeper forensic testing. Days later, buried several feet underground and wrapped in layers of plastic, investigators recovered 2 critical pieces of evidence: a torn piece of cloth with Dee's DNA and her wedding ring. There was still no body, but the message was clear: someone had tried to hide her. The evidence was pointing in one direction, and it was closing in fast. As public interest in Dee Warner's disappearance grew, the case that had once seemed to be slowing gained sudden momentum. Media outlets across Michigan began covering the story, and soon it reached national attention. The more people learned about the circumstances, the more outraged they became. Dee had vanished without a trace, and the man suspected of knowing the most, Dale Henderson, was still walking free. Pressure mounted on local law enforcement, who had faced criticism for the slow pace of the investigation. Protesters began to appear outside the county sheriff's office, holding signs and demanding justice for Dee. With the spotlight now glaring, more people started coming forward with information. A former girlfriend of Dale's contacted police with chilling details about their relationship. She claimed that Dale had been possessive and verbally abusive, especially when he sensed she might leave him. He had once threatened her by saying, "People go missing all the time," a comment she brushed off back then but now remembered with clarity and fear. Another woman, a neighbor from years earlier, recalled hearing similar threats during arguments Dale had with Dee. The pattern was unmistakable. Dale reacted with control and intimidation whenever he felt abandoned or powerless. Investigators began reviewing hours of footage from nearby properties and businesses. It was a break in the case that came from an unexpected source, a neighbor's drone. A week before Dee's disappearance, the neighbor had flown the drone over the area to capture footage of the farmland for a landscaping project. The footage showed Dale's truck parked near the edge of the woods at a strange hour, far from any work-related site. While it wasn't conclusive, the timestamp coincided with when Dee's phone last connected to a nearby cell tower. Investigators used this information to narrow their search. Another breakthrough came from a private investigator hired by Dee's brother. He uncovered records showing that Dale had purchased cleaning supplies, tarps, and plastic sheeting days before Dee vanished. Combined with witness reports and physical evidence, a picture was forming of a calculated cover-up. Dale, it appeared, hadn't acted out of sudden rage. He had planned it. The forensic team returned to the woods with renewed urgency. This time, cadaver dogs hit on the same area as before, but now the soil was tested with specialized tools capable of detecting human decomposition at microscopic levels. What they found was enough to secure a warrant to excavate the land. Beneath layers of dirt and debris, buried in a plastic-wrapped bundle, investigators uncovered partial human remains. Dental records confirmed what Dee's family had feared but already suspected. The remains were hers. News of the discovery spread quickly. Candlelight vigils turned into quiet memorials. Her daughter posted a heartbreaking message online, thanking everyone who refused to give up. Dee had been found. The community that once feared she had been lost forever now knew the truth. Someone had tried to erase her, but in the end, her story refused to stay hidden. The discovery of Dee Warner's remains changed everything. After months of doubt, delays, and speculation, there was now physical proof that she had been murdered, and it was enough for authorities to move forward. Within 48 hours of the forensic confirmation, Dale Henderson was arrested at his home. He didn't resist. In the booking photo, he appeared pale and expressionless, like a man who had accepted the moment would come. The news of his arrest sent shockwaves through Lenawee County. Some were stunned, others not at all. For Dee's family, it was a grim step toward closure, the beginning of justice. The prosecution wasted no time building their case. They laid out a timeline based on Dee's phone records, Dale's vehicle data, security footage, and witness testimony. Dee had been planning to cut ties, financially, personally, and legally. She had met with her lawyer days before she disappeared. She had made it clear to close friends and family that she was preparing to end the relationship. On the night she vanished, Dale was the only other person known to be at the farmhouse. His phone data showed him driving toward a remote patch of woods after midnight. Evidence recovered from the burial site, including plastic sheeting and material linked to items in Dale's truck, tied him directly to the disposal. The most damning testimony came during the trial from a former employee of the trucking business. He said that in the week leading up to Dee's disappearance, Dale had offered him several $100s in cash to help move something big from the property. The employee refused, thinking it was just junk or equipment, but found the request odd. After Dee vanished, Dale allegedly warned him not to talk to police, saying, "If you know what's good for you, you'll keep your mouth shut." That statement, repeated in court under oath, sent a chill through the room. The defense argued that there was no video evidence of the crime itself, no eyewitness, and no murder weapon. But the circumstantial and physical evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Dale Henderson was found guilty of first-degree murder, unlawful disposal of a body, and obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the months that followed, Dee's family worked to pick up the pieces. Her daughter took over operations of the trucking company and renamed it Warner Logistics in her honor. A foundation was created to help victims of domestic abuse in rural communities, where support can be hard to find. Dee's story was shared on television and podcasts, not only as a warning but also as a message of persistence. She had nearly been erased, but her family, friends, and community refused to let her be forgotten. Even in death, Dee Warner's strength endured. What was meant to be hidden was brought to light. What was meant to be silenced became a voice for others. And in the end, the truth found a way out.